just want to welcome today, we have Charles Cranston Jett with us, who is a multi-published author, and we have been fortunate to have him here today to talk to us about how he became a successfully published author, the process he went through, and to just give you a little bit of inspiration on how you too can become published and just move forward with your manuscript. So I just want to welcome you today, Charlie. How are you?
I'm doing fine, Joellen, and I hope you're doing the same.
Excellent. So just to get us started, I would love for you to describe yourself as a writer. Let us know a little bit about your interests, maybe some of your writing groups or different abilities, skills, or problems that you faced. Just tell us a little bit more of how authors can relate to you.
Okay, well, I'm not a professional writer. I mean, I didn't start a career as writing. As a matter of fact, I didn't start writing until I was in my late 60s, okay? And so I'm writing from a lot of experience. And the way it started is I used to, back in my career days, spend a lot of time on the lecture circuit with the major business schools around the United States, Harvard and Stanford and Wharton and Pennsylvania, Chicago, and that sort of stuff, talking about, at first, about how do you get ahead in the corporate world. And, you know, giving these fresh MBA students a bunch of advice on what you have to really be good at in order to get ahead. And I did a bunch of research on that and came up with some critical skills that you have to have based on some excellent, I won't go into details on the research, but it was well done. And then I developed some software to support programs of teaching these kinds of things. Okay. And then after I stopped doing that sort of stuff, I thought, well, I know all of this stuff and the stuff is still relevant. Why don't I just write it down? And I was strongly suggested that I write a book about it. So I just sat down one day and started in, and it was relatively easy. Oh. And so the first book was called, I don't know if you can see this, it was called Wanted: 8 Critical Skills You Need to Succeed. Right. And then I didn't know how to go about publishing and all that sort of stuff, and I didn't want to, I didn't think it was worthwhile to you spend time getting an agent and doing all that kind of stuff, so I decided to do self-publishing. Wow. And because I've got an MBA from Harvard in marketing, so I know how to market a book, and I didn't need to transfer that to some agent or some publishing house and that sort of stuff. And then the process was just sitting down, outlining it, and I can. One of the great skills that I have is I can type as fast as I can think. Ah. So I could just sit on fly on the keyboard. So that was probably one of the most important things I ever took in school. I took that way back in high school 100 years ago. Oh. So then, you know, then I wrote that book, and when I finished that, I also had some experience and created a little device for for career counseling and that sort of thing called the Doom Loop, and it was a creative little simple thing that I presented twice to the National Convention of the American Psychological Association, and with the mistaken thought that, you know, I could present this and somehow it would bring a lot of business to me. Right. And instead, all I got was a bunch of resumes from psychologists that wanted to go to work for me. So that didn't work. So I sat down and I wrote that book. Uh-huh. That's a short little book that it was pretty lots of fun to do. Mm-hmm. And then I remembered that I developed some programs back during my career about how to teach these critical skills in the high schools and that sort of stuff, and developed some software to do that and to help schools do that kind of thing. And it's a process called field studies, which is a very disciplined process of how you go about solving a problem and going out and actually helping kids work in teams to solve problems. And I know they do that kind of thing in Sweden, by the way, the educational system. And so I wrote a book about that called Field Studies. Nice. And I'm just giving you a brief background on the books I've written, and we'll get into some of the other details. then once those are out, why those were nonfiction. Those were actually real. They were non. What's the word? They weren't fiction. They were nonfiction. And then I was told, gee, you had so many experiences in the Cold War on the nuclear submarine business, and why don't you write a book about that? And briefly about that, I was fortunate enough back in the 60s I was a Naval Academy product from the United States Naval Academy at Annapolis. Okay. And I went into the nuclear submarine program under the Admiral Rickover program for the United States. And I went through the training program and then was assigned to a new fast attack nuclear submarine in construction. And two different kinds of submarines. There's the ones that shoot the missiles, and fortunately we haven't shot any. And then there were the other ones that were the spies in the Cold War. And those are the ones that were specifically designed to go out and go up against the Soviet Union. And so we were the system and the people that actually went out and strangled the Soviet Union. Oh. And the boat that I was on, and submarines are called boats, by the way, I was the electrical and reactor control officer to build it, and then the operations officer when we went on the missions. And we were the first operational submarine of that class, and it was just the most modern thing we had. And so, we developed some new tactics and systems and that sort of thing. And later on, I was in a position to actually pull all that stuff together and develop some programs at the U.S. Naval Submarine School and teach that sort of thing for the rest of the fleet. And so I wrote a book about that called Super Nuke. It's the story about the contributions of that particular submarine to winning the Cold War, because what we did was the stuff that actually went out and put a stranglehold on the Soviet Navy. And it was people didn't even know we were doing that kind of thing at the time, but we were doing it. And so I wrote a book about that, and then it was kind of fun, and so I thought I'd try my hand at fiction. And I wasn't very good at dreaming up just stories from scratch, so I decided to write a story about a woman who was a 21-year-old single woman who went out into the far southwestern part of North Dakota, way out in the Midwest, far mountain, or the Great Plains, actually. And then homesteaded on her own. She was single, and she developed a homestead on her own and built up a ranch on her own.
Wow.
And she's gay.
Oh.
And it's an interesting story, and it happens to be true. It was my grandmother, and it was in the year 1908 that when she went out there. And so it's a story that, and the story is called Bess.
Yeah.
Bess was her actual name, and it's a story about, that book is about the period from about 1908 to 1916, and all the things she had to go through to, the woes and stuff that she had to suffer going through and being successful. So those are the books that I've written, and I've got the sequel to Bess in editing right now with First Editing.
Good job.
About that, a little plug here for you, because I think you do a real good job. That's how I got into it. That's where I am. I love it.
That's great. Well, congratulations. That's a lot of successes. It's not just one. It's quite a library you're building there. So,
if you just think you can do it, you can.
Yeah, that's the hard part, is just believing. I think it's just believing. Tell us, why was it important to publish a book? What was motivating you from the very beginning? Was it your ultimate goal or your end result? What was it?
The first goal was on the nonfiction things, on the skills, was to memorialize those things, because they are important. Yeah. And while a lot of these things the research was done back in the 80s and 90s and so forth, they're still relevant. I mean, you still have to be able to think critically and things like that. Right. And I thought it'd be important to write those things down and memorialize it and to get it out there, because that's what this country right now is thinking about doing. How do you get a skilled workforce? Exactly. And how do you teach people how to actually do things rather than just be able to answer questions on a standardized test and pick A, B, C, or D? That doesn't teach you anything except how to take a test.
Right.
So, why I wanted to do it, I wanted to memorialize it.
Mm.
And when I finished that way, I had the same feeling with the other things. I thought I'd memorialize that little doom loop thing, and then I wanted to tell the story about the submarine because these guys actually contributed so much. And I was having so much fun, I started writing about Bess.
You've got a lot of great things going on. So some people struggle with a plot or an idea, but yours is just flowing out. So where do you find help? When you're writing these books, the information you needed, because you decided to self-publish. You skipped going to a publisher or anything like that. So what kind of groups or tools or people, websites, what kind of books did you find helpful?
Well, I've used there's some good resources on a thing called the Great Courses.
Okay.
And it's you can get it on Apple TV or Roku and that sort of thing, where you can enroll into various courses. You can take anything you want on creative writing, nonfiction, that sort of thing. It tells you, it's kind of like attending a college course on writing. So I've done that, and then I use Google a lot. If I use Google sometimes to deal with issues like, what do I do when I have brain freeze, and get tips from other people, and then sign up for a lot of these websites. Like, there's I can't remember some of them. You get their newsletters and that sort of stuff, where people offer you little tidbits of advice, and 95% of it is common sense, but then there's that 5% that just is a golden gem that you get. And then and I formed a meetup group in Chicago about aspiring writers, about writers that might be interested in doing what we're talking about right now. And I haven't had a meeting with them yet because I haven't gotten around to it. But my first meeting, I think, is going to be a setup meeting where we're going to talk about what we're going to do.
Okay.
And the second meeting, I want to get a hold of an agent.
Okay.
Have an agent come and talk about the value of agents. And the incentive for the agent would be that he or she might just meet somebody. It's a good writer. And so I'm going to do that, but I haven't done it yet.
Well, sounds great.
Yeah, that's my plan. So I don't read things like creative writing for dummies and stuff like that. I'll read about, I want to show and not tell. Example of that. Or I'll read novels of people that I admire, whose descriptions I admire, like John Steinbeck. Or he was particularly helpful when his book, The Grapes of Wrath, was particularly helpful when I was writing the sequel to Bess about the Dirty 30s. Yeah. I didn't copy anything, but I knew how to talk about dust storms.
Yeah.
And then I also like Hemingway because I like the way he describes what's going on through dialogue. Yeah. And that's what I tried to do. Not that good, but at least, what the heck, I've got a good role model.
Yeah. So. I love Hemingway. He's one of my all-time favorites. So definitely. That's how you got there, and you decided to self-publish. What made you choose professional editing services? What was the deciding factor there?
One thing was, I firmly believe, although I'm a pretty good writer, I don't think that anybody of any significance can really write final copy. Okay. And, you write things down, and then after you written most of the things down, all the words start looking the same. And it's very difficult to go in and find things that don't make sense. At least it is for me. And so I like to give it to a really good editor who'll go up and, go in and take a knife to it and rip it apart. The worst thing I can do is I give it to somebody that's a friend or something like that, and they read it and they come back and say, well, that's really good. I like it. It doesn't tell you anything. I'd rather have an editor go at it and rip it to shreds, and because I've got a thick skin and I just wanted to make it good, And actually, when I tried first editing, I wasn't to give you a commercial, but I'm doing that. I decided to give it a try, and I tried it with Bess, the first book, And I got an editor by the name of Allison, and who was wonderful.
Yeah.
And she got into the story. First of all, you want to get an editor that likes the story.
Right.
She liked the story, and then she came back and just tore it to shreds. And I mean, not really, but she really put some good effort into it, and was able to describe things a lot better than I was able to, and give me suggestions where I was doing things that were stupid, and and I liked that. Then once she was done, then I took it to us, to the self-publishing editor, who I also know quite well, and when I gave it to that editor before submitting it to actually be published, I let her go another round on it. And I she was incredibly impressed with what Allison did, but I didn't tell her that Allison did it. It looked like I was really, really good writer. So, but I not only believe in editing, I believe in double editing.
Yeah.
And I like to have two different pairs of smart eyes looking at it.
Oh, it's necessary. It's just.
Oh, it's a person who wants to publish without an editor, I think, is a fool.
I think it's important for everyone to know that it's really, and it's the biggest expense you'll have out there. It's a long time investment sometimes, and it can be a little painful, but it's part of the process. So, What was your biggest roadblocks when you were writing? What did you have to overcome to become published?
The biggest roadblock was first of all, once you have brain freeze of how to describe something. So when that would happen, I wouldn't stop. I just write the words blah blah blah, and move on.
Right.
And then and then I'd come back, or maybe go out and smoke a cigar or something like that, or wait a week and come back in, and then I'd think of something new. But that's how I overcome the brain freeze thing, or just get a good night's sleep. And I like to write early in the morning, so maybe if I get up in the morning. And the other thing was, what was the other thing that got me? I can't remember right now, but it'll come back. But brain freeze, basically.
Yeah, that's a hard one. It's a hard one.
Was always trying to find, you don't want to have, when you're writing stories about people and nonfiction, you don't want to have things go smoothly all the time. You want to have your protagonist have a problem to solve.
Right.
So, for example, and I don't want to give away some of the stuff in Bess, but I had her fall in love with somebody, and I killed her off.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted the reader to really fall in love with the character, and then she had an accident. It was an accidental death, and it was just shocking, and that really created a problem.
Yeah.
But that's what you do. That's the kind of thing that you do, I think. So I kind of had doing that. Although I didn't like killing off I kind of fell in love with the character I created. But I sort of hate to kill her off.
Yeah, murder.
But the point is, you got to give your protagonist a problem to solve, because if everything's going smoothly, it's boring.
Yeah. Conflict. Must have conflict.
Conflict.
So.
Yeah. If you go right, it's not, read another book,
So what specific steps were required to achieve your success? What were some of your steps that you took?
Well, first of all, to find a good editor, which I did. And then to take a look at the different self-publishers, the different. So I did a lot of research on who's good, and I found three. The top three that I looked at were Create Space with Amazon. Looked at one called Outskirts Press, which is the one I used.
Okay.
I looked at Hulu. I think it's Hulu or Lulu or something like that. Lulu or something like that. I wanted something. And I decided to use Outskirts Press because I just kind of liked the sound of what they were doing. And then it turned out it was a good choice, because then the team that I had work on the first book, I've had the same team on each one after that. So that's they now know what I'm doing, and in terms of that was a problem to pick the right publisher, and I got lucky, and then work with them in a productive way. you know, and let them, give them ideas on how you want the cover designed, and then always seek professional help. Design the cover. I mean, don't try to do it yourself.
No.
And so I get professional help doing that, and then you know, the design of the book, all that details of the typeset and all that kind of stuff. They did that stuff, kind of stuff, and you know, if they think something's stupid, why they tell me, and I listen.
What costs did you have?
The costs were paying for the editing, which I think is a valuable cost. And originally, I paid for things like getting getting help with getting a copyright and things like that, which I find you can do it on your own. I mean, that's pretty simple. And then you can get your ISBN numbers on your own too, and that sort of thing. And I mean, you don't have to pay triple the cost, you know, to do that. So you can save a little money. And at first, I paid for a little marketing assistance, but I wasn't very happy with that, because basically they were telling me exactly what I was doing anyway. And that was a cost. And then I paid to join some of these groups that or websites where they promote your book. Okay. I mean, they'll list your book on you know, like I don't know, you got to get it on Goodreads. You got to get, I don't have to sign up for that. And then at first I paid for somebody to review the book. Okay. It was a mistake. I mean, I got a good review, but I mean, I also got good reviews from people who I didn't have to pay. Right. And then I also paid for a radio interview. Okay. Which was very helpful, but something that I wouldn't do again, because I've learned, you know, the way, if you want to, I'm a real Amazon freak, and I think that's where, I mean, I also priced the book and set up the discounts so that it would be more electronic than and sold on Amazon as opposed and through Barnes and Noble rather than in the bookstores. I have no feeling about going in and doing book signings at a bookstore and that sort of stuff, and I don't care. I have this ego that my book's on a bookshelf somewhere, because I think Amazon is the big gorilla in the business anyway, and so I focus all my efforts on selling on Amazon. Yeah, good choice. I mean, they're just, you can even sell books to people in Sweden. So. Exactly. You can sell all over the world. They're just sitting there waiting. So, and another thing where you can save money, and I didn't incur these costs, was using some of these publishers. They use print on demand. Right. What means if somebody orders a book, why the book is then printed and sent. We have the technology to do that kind of thing now. Amazing. And you know, so you don't have to buy 10,000 books and store them in your garage, you know. And you don't have to pay insurance for book purchase, you know, returns for bookstores and stuff like that. I just ignore that. Well, that's good. That's good. Good advice. That's something people overlook. So how did you manage your time? You know, you had all these books to write and you've been very busy. How do you manage your time, and how do you avoid time wasters? I manage my time by, you know, my wife is a physician. She's a OB-GYN physician, and she's one of these robotic surgeons. So she's always going to the office and that sort of stuff. And I get up in the morning and make breakfast for her, and then I go in and sit down and write, because I'm fresh in the morning, and then I do it. And then I always discipline myself to try to write about 3,000 words a day. Wow. And which is something, I mean, I guess it sounds like a lot, but really it's not that hard to do. It's just a few pages, you know. And then if I get inspired some other time during the day, I just sit down and start doing it. Or even in the middle of the night. If I wake up and can't go to sleep, I'll get up and write a couple of pages, and then I go to sleep. So I discipline myself by actually forcing myself to do it every morning. Yeah, that's good. So you have a nice, strong habit. What frustrations did you encounter, and what do you wish you'd done differently? I would have started earlier. You know, I would have started 10 years earlier, because I figure the only thing that keeps people from publishing books is just getting started. Yeah. And you get started and then you get on a roll and develop some habits and develop some discipline and force yourself to do it. And it works. And you just do it,
How did you feel at the beginning and at the end of your journey? What were your emotions through all of this?
At the beginning, I was a little intimidated because I didn't know anything. I didn't know if I could write. Well, I am a pretty good writer. I'm a pretty good writer, and I'm a pretty good public speaker. So because I have a lot of practice doing that kind of stuff. And what was my emotions to start out with were can I really write a book? I mean, me, can I do that? And the answer, of course, is damn right I could do it. You can do anything you set your mind to do. So I thought, okay, I'll sit down and start doing it. And then I got it was a little growing pains to try to write in a clear way. And I got onto that. And then writing, biggest criticism and thing that frustrated me about how I felt about it is I got a little down at first because I was one of these writers that was writing more like I was lecturing.
Okay.
Like I'm telling you something, and I'm telling you this and telling you that, rather than showing. I had to learn how to show and not tell. Right. And that was a little bit frustrating. When I learned how to do that, I was feeling elated. And then when the first book got published, I really felt great. I mean, it's just like something like, hey, I can do this. And then actually the work really begins, because that's when you have to start marketing the darn thing.
Right.
And that's an endless job. I mean, that's just daily. And and then how I feel about it right now is I feel really good. I mean, that's I didn't go into this to try to make a lot of money. I do okay. But I didn't go in this as my first job. I mean, it's a lot of times if somebody's a writer, I'd suggest they get a day job too, because there aren't a lot of people who do only writing and that sort of stuff. And that there are a few, of course, that are big time, but I think most people who write books don't make enough on their books to earn a living. No. And that's not my goal. And I didn't want to discourage anybody from going that route, because lots of people have done it. Yeah. But that wasn't my thing. I just get the satisfaction of having done it. And then another example of how I feel about, to answer your question, how I feel about it is, we had our 50th reunion of the commissioning crew of the submarine that I built.
Okay.
The crew. And this book was written about them, essentially. And so it was in Norfolk, Virginia about a month ago. And I was asked to be the keynote speaker. And we had about a couple hundred people there and everything like that. And going back and having documented what they did and giving them the credit. I wrote the book as a memoir because I had to see what they did through my own eyes and tell the story from my own perspective. But it wasn't a story about me. It was a story about what they did, and how they contributed. And I got a chance to speak for 45 minutes, and it was a great thrill to do that. So, that's the answer. I think I answered your question.
Yeah, that's a lot of emotions, a lot of journey there. So I'm going to leave the last one to you. What are your final words of advice? How can other authors overcome their emotional barriers or fears to become a successfully published author like you?
Well, I'll tell you. First of all, you just got to do it. When I was at the Naval Academy, there was the superintendent would always tell us, you can do anything you set your mind to do. So you really got to believe that, and you can. And then there was throughout my life, and even during this episode, this journey of writing books and that sort of stuff. I sent you a poem in that book. Do you want me to? Can I read that to you?
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is something that we had to memorize. That I had to memorize. Everybody does when they're at the Naval Academy of in their first year when they're a plebe, which means you're a first year student and you're really nothing. And it's a little poem called All in the State of Mind.
Okay.
Now, I must say in advance that it was written back when the Naval Academy was an all-male institution. Mm-hmm. So there are references in here to men, guys and fellows and stuff like that. Mm. And you can actually, I won't change the words because then it doesn't rhyme, okay?
Okay.
But what this says is, this applies to women as well as men. But if I make it gender friendly, then it doesn't rhyme, okay?
Okay.
So it's called, if you think you are beaten, you are. If you think you dare not, you don't. If you would like to win and don't think you can, it's almost a cinch you won't. If you think you'll lose, you're lost, for out in the world you'll find success begins with a fellow's will. It's all in the state of the mind. Full many a race is lost, ere even a step is run, and many a coward fails, ere even his work is begun. Think big and your deeds will grow. Think small and you'll fall behind. Think that you can and you will. It's all in the state of mind. If you think you're outclassed, you are. You've got to think high to rise. You've got to be sure of yourself before you ever can win a prize. And it ends, life's battles don't always go to the stronger or faster man. But sooner or later, the man who wins is the fellow who thinks he can. So that's the advice that I would give people. First of all, you can do anything you set your mind to do, and just go out and do it, and think you can, you will, and just keep it in your mind that you can do it.
Good advice. We'll
Makes
leave
sense?
it at that. Yeah, that's fantastic. I think it's very inspirational, and I just want to thank you for sharing that today. And I hope all the other authors out there are listening, and that they see some inspiration there that they can take home, and that little golden gem you talked about, and put it to their heart and make it happen. So
and
thank you.
I also say that First Editing does a good job.
Well, we thank you for that. We thank you very much.
Don't edit that out because it was unsolicited, but it's true. I use yours, okay?
Won't be edited. Nope. We'll leave it there. We'll leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to many more books.
You got it. Thanks, Joellen.